This video is going to get into the weeds as Thomas has been very busy over on Twitter sharing his thoughts about game design and so much more. And so this video we're going to explore those thoughts, because as we wait for news about the updated roadmap, as we wait for what and when these the next update is coming, I thought this would be a fun way to check in with you guys, especially because I'm preparing right now to have my most disliked podcast since I've had the Quartering on years ago. That's right, guys. If you are paying attention, Grumes is going to be on the podcast today. We've got a lot of questions for him. He's a controversial figure. Some really love him. Some definitely don't. Many are mad that we're talking with him today, but if you guys are mad about that, then you haven't really been paying attention. I'm always willing to have a conversation with anybody, and I think that's an important aspect of it. And so just note, if I'm not willing to lose subscribers, then I'm not willing to be followed in the first place. And that's something that I take a lot of joy and pride in. So the internet reaction to this has been very enjoyable for me, so to speak. So whether you check out the podcast or not, thank you for being here. Thank you guys so much for the support on my interview with Thomas last week. 2 hours logged and almost 10,000 views. Thank you guys so much, and just under 450 likes. I really do appreciate it, guys. But let's dive into why you clicked on this video in the first place. Thomas kicks it off this morning saying, I think it's always important for designers to break gameplay flows down to further their core essence in order to understand how to take things further. Here's an example. I say that the classic FPS games like Doom and Quake could be broken down to them being simplified versions of Zelda. You roam through complex mazes that have locked doors. You need to find keys in certain locations and remember where the locked doors are, and then backtrack to them in order to ultimately get to the exit. On your journey, you'll also find a bunch of secret passages that contain more extras that make your life a little easier. They also break up the flow a bit and introduce a nice element of rewarding exploration. But compared to Zelda, when you found the exit, more often than not, there wasn't actually a boss at the end of the dungeon. Quake and Doom was just dungeon after dungeon. There wasn't an overworld like in Zelda where you could use the items, weapons you found in order to unlock new places. The only big changes here was how you fight enemies, and obviously the perspective that at a high level, these first-person shooters definitely share a lot of inspiration with Zelda. Now that that is being at the high-level breakdown, you could twist the whole thing around and make a new version of that in that game, and it gets to that level of Zelda and was at, and even expand upon it. I'd like to say that Metroid Prime did just that. You still are roaming through complex mazes, and you had to remember where all the locked doors are, but now you didn't just find keys, you also gained new abilities, and oftentimes locked doors were instead little gameplay sections that you could only pass using those new abilities. And Metroid Prime did connect all of the dungeons through an overworld, and there were these weapons and abilities that could be used further in order to explore and gain more of these extras. All of that begs the question, how do you evolve that concept even further? Thomas then goes on to say, that isn't to say that adding more complexity is always better. Oftentimes it's quite the contrary, and you should subtract as much as that as possible so that you are left with just the core essence that you can then fully dive into and perfect. I'd argue that games like chess, Tetris, etc. do just that. Roguelikes, for example, often follow a similar goal. To me, Hades 1 was basically just a streamlined version of Diablo 1 with all the fat having been cut off. But ultimately, adding complexity does often help elevating genres to a new level. For designers especially, I think that it's helpful to categorize these approaches. I'd boil it down to expansive games versus streamlined games, and that could be applied to almost all games, e.g. brawlers like Double Dragon, River City Ransom, etc. I'd put it into those expansive game box, whereas fighting games like Street Fighter I'd put into a streamlined games box, since these games took just that one element, the actual fighting, and focused entirely on that. And Brian jumping in on this, I love that he used Double Dragon and River City Ransom. Those were two of the biggest games and time sinks that I actually had as a kid, and honestly I'm definitely nostalgia glassed eyed, rose tinted glasses when it comes to those games. And I think it was really cool that he called those out, especially as it relates to then fighting games, which essentially, yes, is just kind of streamlining one aspect of it and then creating a whole genre from there. But anyway, Thomas continues, another example of an expansive game is like Metal Gear Solid. MGS1 on the PlayStation was basically just a fancy version of Pac-Man. You had your complex mazes with enemies blocking your path, and they added a few more elements in order to make the hide-and-seek illusion work. But at its core of it, it was Pac-Man, and taking one look at the radar basically confirms that. And I wouldn't say that one approach is better than the other. Often that it's nice to engage in a fancy meal, but sometimes it's just a simple dish that does the trick and satisfies your palate. But Thomas wasn't there. This is the thing I really respect and like about the guy, is he takes time to reply. So Dire Prism writes, I honestly don't think that describing them as glorified Zeldas is fair. Yes, Doom and Quake have doors and keys, but what really defines them is the first-person shooter gameplay, in particular with them pioneering 3D. Also, Hexen 2 is worth taking a look at when it comes to redefining keys. Thomas replies, well, but that's just a moment-to-moment gameplay change, so it doesn't really count from a high-level perspective. It's important, but it's essentially a detail. When broken down to its core essence, there is no denying that these games borrow almost the exact same structure. I'm not trying to belittle what Doom and Quake, etc. have done for our industry, but I think that it's always interesting to deconstruct it to the bare essentials in order to then reconstruct something new. Mr. Pequot writes, rather than expanding on game concepts that are rarely established, i.e. adding elements to a first-person shooter game, I'd rather see a fresh idea, never seen before. What could that be, I wonder? Smiley face. Thomas replies, many people would argue that this doesn't necessarily exist because the core building blocks are simple and most of those have already been exploited. Can you think of any truly fresh idea in gaming in the past 2 decades or so that wasn't built on the basic concepts introduced by some classic? And that's a question I'd also like to propose to you, dear listener who is hanging out with me. It's like, what do you feel about that? Has there been a game? I think we've seen some of these concepts and new things get introduced as the technology has made that possible. Take an RPG going from turn-based into action combat. That essentially was a technical limitation of its time, but then you see those things kind of, growing out of that. So it's really interesting to see. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to sound off in the comments, we can have that discussion, especially in future videos. Thomas wraps it up though. He says, interestingly, so I was playing Doom for the first time, even if you did play Zelda before. So for some reason, we can perceive things as new and groundbreaking, even if they are essentially just new ways to skin the cat. And that's in reference to what he's talking about here. We might perceive them to be new. And in fact, I think that is the real design artistry behind it. I feel there's something really incredibly new about No Rest for the Wicked. And that being said, is that I do also recognize it is still building on the blocks of everything that's come before it. The marketplace of ideas is something I always want to encourage. And that's one of the things that I've seen has both benefited video games, but with certain genres like MMOs, it has really hindered it. And what I mean by that is that when players have been locked into these games as a service for so long, it's harder for them to make a jump to something else. And so a marketplace of ideas has really struggled, and that's why I think we're seeing so much pushback and so much struggle within the games as a service category, because gamers are fatigued, because it has been the same thing. They haven't reskinned, the whole process. They haven't gone back to kind of its core and taken a look at what technology has given them today so that they can truly kind of expand on that. I think No Rest for the Wicked is being a pioneer in that regards, but it is also building off of what has come before it. And Zelda is a really good example, and so is Diablo. Those are really good examples. And at some point, it's possible that if this game truly does redefine what it means to be an isometric action RPG, Souls-like, then I think you'll probably see that people will say, hey, it's like Wicked, at some point. And that's where I think that the team and the devs are shooting for. But guys, that wraps it up for the video game portion of these videos. We always like to end off with a message of hope. Today, I want to be talking about your mental and men's health when it comes down to especially living. We know right now that there is a crisis, and there's a lot of young men all over, who unfortunately are choosing kind of a permanent option to a temporary problem. And I want to talk to you guys directly because I know what that can feel like. I know what those thoughts can be, but those thoughts don't define you. I thought this was a funny little thing to kind of lighten up the mood here. It says, this year, thousands of men will die from stubbornness, and somebody spray painted, no, we won't on it. And I want to take that stubbornness and kind of apply it to here, not today. You know, that's kind of the mindset that I want to highlight for you guys. It is not a weakness. It is not a sign that you are anything less than worthy of love to seek out help. You know, I like to say, you know, as a part of my journey, there was some physical issues. There was also a couple of some cognitive behavioral therapy helped me out dramatically. And I want to encourage you guys to get up there. Now, I want to also show this thing from Superman. I'm a huge Superman fan. I'm really looking forward to James Gunn's Superman here next summer. So Superman says, whatever strength I have doesn't belong to me. It belongs to those who need it. And right now that's you. And I believe he's talking to Metallo in this image. And when it's all said and done, I think this is something that I want you to take home, if at all possible, is that both you're worthy of being loved, but you're also worthy of being redeemed and redemption in this regards. Regardless of how far you feel disconnected from society, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to be stuck where you are. And it's important to me to encourage you guys to be that, because one of the things I find, especially as a man, is I love being challenged to things. And so today I want to challenge you guys to not give up and to not give in, and to take a step forward to figure out what it is and who it is that you are meant to be. Because essentially, if you're not really like registering, if you're letting the darkness kind of creep in, if you're entertaining those thoughts, those are just lies. Those aren't the real reality. And I want you to push back against that and really start to try and frame your mind, because we, like, in a way, as a software engineer, this is our programming, and we can rewrite our programming. We can really push ourselves forward to who we want to be. And sometimes that's going to take hard work, and sometimes that doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow, and that's okay. In fact, oftentimes it isn't in that challenge, in that journey, that really we become who we're meant to be. So I just want to encourage you guys to do that today, if at all possible. And if nothing else, if you guys ever, just need to chat, etc., the Discord is always open. You can always shoot me a DM if you don't feel like having a conversation in the comments or something like that. So just note, those are options for you guys, and I'm just rooting for you. And I appreciate you guys hanging out for this video. I know it wasn't really like news, breaking, crazy information, but it was still fun for me to make, and I really enjoyed that. Anyway, guys, that's going to wrap it up for me. Thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Special shout out and thank you to my members here at the channel. And again, thank you guys so much. And if you have not seen the interview with Thomas, it'd mean a lot to me if you go check that out after this video. Anyway, guys, hopefully I will see you guys in the next video. But until then, take care.